reside at 3981 Platt Avenue, Groveport, Ohio. I have 3 children. 2 have graduated from Groveport already. 1 is attending middle school still today. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, you all have emails referring to it because I can't shorten it up in 3 minutes. So I'm going to try and give it brief to you. Last time I was here, I talked about the masking mandates and was hoping that you would not move to that position. I believe that the mask, from my research studies, not just from social media, but from my own studies, that the mask actually harms us more than it actually protects us. And there's a lot of different criteria that goes in behind that with the moisture that's being held in the mask over a period of time as well. The virus itself is actually so small that it still filters through the mask. The masks that you guys are wearing that are blue, especially, anything that is cloth, the virus is so small that it actually still goes through the mask into your lungs, and then you can still breathe it out. So it doesn't really serve any purpose. There are other issues it causes, like aspiration, shortness of breath, which actually flares up other issues like my anxiety. So I am a victim of this as well through my job, where they're mandating it, and they're also mandating vaccines. So I'm completely against either one, just so we're clear on that. I also want to bring up the fact that the school transportation system problem, it's been a problem for several decades now. I've been a school bus driver for 10 years. I recently left approximately 2014 or 15 due to the morale. There is no support from the district, and we have a new superintendent, but I thought things were going to look better, but they're not. We're having issues at the school level still for high school, where we're still having fights and stuff that are delaying the buses. So it's not just the bus drivers, and it's not just Peterman who cannot support the needs. It's both the district and Peterman that cannot correspond together accordingly to get this done. You also have that you had charter schools that you had to re-add because you tried to not transport them, which was against the law. So now you have those added buses again, and now you're short-staffed because they're not paying the drivers. The industry is having a problem across the board, and for you to try and hold Peterman or the drivers or the National Express accountable for just this problem alone is ridiculous. They all need your support as much as the pandemic needs to come to an end so they can get people back in, because it's obvious people don't want to drive with a mandate for masking or vaccinations. So those are my concerns, and we need to address also student discipline. When it comes to bus drivers, and when I was a bus driver, the main reason why I left the first time was because there was no support. The districts, the superintendents, the principals did not back us up when we wrote children up. Oh, you're just writing little Johnny up 2 or 3 times. No, I myself had a 3 strikes you're out before I even did a school write-up, and they knew it. They sat in the front seat. We had a chit chat. So this has been going on for a while, and we need to address it from the inside out. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you for taking your time and coming in and speaking to us. We appreciate your message. Now we'll move on to item E, reports and presentations.
Good evening. I brought my team with me, so I didn't have to do this by myself. So, go ahead and flip to what is special education. Okay, I have Maggie Riley with me and Tracy Bernhardt with me. So we're just going to give you a brief update about special ed. So basically what special ed is, it's just a program that has been designed it's an act that ensures that identified students are provided programming specially designed to meet their needs. Then the intent is to level the playing field so that all kids have the ability to be successful. Next page. Can I do it? Oh, okay, I won't do it. So we're starting off with in our group we have 14 disabilities that are recognized nationwide. And when you look at this, I know it's hard to see here, we have 14 disabilities, and we have students that qualify in every single one of these categories. We have some kids that we send out to other schools to meet their needs, but overall, we have students in our buildings right now that qualify in one of these 14 categories. Okay, so when you look at this, now these numbers are from last week, a week and a half ago, so they're continuously rising. But if you're looking at, we have 67 preschool students, which will go up to probably 170 by the end of the school year. We start to identify a lot of preschool kids as the year goes on. 471 elementary students, 257 middle school students, 318 high school students. So we're over 1,100 special ed kids in our district. We've enrolled over 80 kids since the start of the school year, and we are enrolling kids every day. So our numbers are rising. The next screen has to do with all the numbers, the number of staff members that we have in special ed. As of right now, not including us, we have 169 people on our team to support our kids. So the one pitfall about special ed is it is a high turnover field of study. In typical, 50% of special ed teachers only make it a few years in our profession. Within 75% of our special ed team will resign. They'll go to gen ed, or they will leave the field in 10 years. So that's something that we're trying to focus on. We're trying to build relationships to get our staff to stay. Look at the next screen. According to analysis by the Education Week Research Center, the number of special ed teachers has dropped by nearly 20%. Now, keep in mind our special ed population is rising, but our special ed teachers, the pool is getting smaller each year. So our focus is on retention. We took all of the staff members that we have in the special ed department, and we were measuring how long they have stayed. And so the benefit, this kind of shows what we feel is our strength, is the fact that over 50% of our special ed team has stayed for more than 10 years. So we district is saying something that a lot of our intervention specialists and therapists are coming and they want to stay. So we did have a turnover of 8 new team members this year. One actually left because the grass was greener in another district. We had 2 that got married and moved away. We had one that didn't get married and moved away. We had 2 that relocated because of their husbands, their spouses, their jobs. And then we had 1 retire and 1 decided to be a stay-at-home mom. So overall, when you look at the number of staff members that actually left, really only 1 left because they wanted to go work with their friend. So if you look at the special ed, when we're looking at academics, we have a special ed report card that we get every year. This past year, we got meets requirements, and that's based on indicators that the state decides is very important for us. And so we earned a score of 4, which is the maximum number that you could get. and um, it measures like how we identify kids, if the proportionality of the different disabilities. It measures how if we are meeting timelines and evaluations, and just overall the way our program runs in compliance. We also have one that has to do with the academics, and we knew that we were struggling in reading and our kids scoring proficient in reading tests. So Maggie and we started a trend where we were working with the ISs and we were looking at MAP scores, identifying the weaknesses, and we started to target on the area that would bring us the biggest bang for our buck. And it paid off because we were proficient. We met the goal that the state gave us, and we met that goal in both reading for all students with a disability as well as the kids on third grade reading test. So we were pretty proud of that.
I'm going to share a little bit about some of our initiatives. The first one is our Support Intervention Specialists, or SISs for short. They're located at all of our elementary schools, and their primary focus is to provide specialized instruction and interventions for social skills and behavior regulation. They do that in a variety of ways. You might see them working with small groups of students. They may also just provide a space for students to come and de-escalate or process through something that's happened, or you might see them covering a classroom for a teacher so the teacher can come out and process with the student. They work with students who receive services on IEPs, as well as any student in the school that might be having needs in these areas. This year, the focus is for them to take the strategy toolbox they've been building together and share it out with the rest of the staff to build capacity. Another initiative that we're very excited about is the Sunday system, which is a structured, systematic, multisensory reading intervention program that uses the proven Orton-Gillingham strategies in all of the lessons. And we were fortunate enough to use the ESSER funding to purchase materials for elementary and middle school intervention specialists. And we're even more excited that we've been able to schedule in-person training for those intervention specialists, which is scheduled for this Friday right here at the DSC.
So I'm going to be talking to you about transition planning, and once students with disabilities are nearing their 14th birthday, in that IEP we're required by law to include a transition plan. And what that plan is, it's supposed to help them prepare for life after high school. I think we have two slides mixed up a little bit. If you could go to the transition planning drives the IEP first, Scott. So beginning at age 14, we provide services and activities to help them prepare for further education and training, or a job, and independent living someday. And so sometimes kids graduate in 4 years. That's our goal, and probably 90 to 95% of our students with disabilities do graduate in 4 years. But there's also other options, including a multi-year graduation, like if they go onto a project search program or another community-based transition program, or some students who have very significant cognitive and other multiple disabilities can stay until their 22nd birthday. So in doing that, we are preparing our students for the real world by having transition programs within our high school. We have a transition coordinator that focuses on working with what we call multi-agency planning. We work with the Franklin County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and we work closely with Ohio Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, which is the new name for the state's Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. And so we work closely with them because all students with IEPs, regardless of their level of needs, qualify for what's called pre-ETS. It's pre-employment training services. And so it's really great to have that extra support from the Franklin County Board of DD and OOD to help us prepare our kids. The nice thing about OOD is that they also provide like job coaching, job development. They can even help kids obtain their driver's license, which is a really important part of being able to get to a job or get to school. So the other things that we do, we have community vocational internships. A couple of our teachers, like our 9th and 10th grade program, we do in-house jobs at the high school. And I guess at one time we had kids working here even before I was here, but then COVID shut down. So we have kids doing some internships within the district. And then we also have a program like for the 11th and 12th graders where they go out into the community. Now, unfortunately, last year we weren't able to do community-based instruction, but some of the places where they did have jobs were like at Giant Eagle. Wood Spring Suites, McGraw-Hill, Room to Run Horse Stables, and the Groveport Recreation Center. Let's see, got a little mixed up here. So overall, I think we do a really great job in building the relationships with the other agencies and working with our kids to develop the services and activities that will help them prepare. Things like, introduction to budgeting or how to fill out a job application. We do mock interviews with kids. The idea is so that kids don't just fall off a cliff when they leave high school. The other thing that I wanted to share was that we really have a great relationship with Eastland Fairfield Career Centers and their specialized programs as well. They have a Project Search program down at Fairfield Medical Center. We also have a new Project Search relationship with the ESC of Central Ohio, and that's down at Nationwide Children's Hospital. And that's a wonderful nationwide program. Actually, it's an international program. If you've never heard of Project Search, I encourage you to look that up. It's great. The kids actually intern in the hospital in a variety of positions and rotate for 9 weeks into each one. And their job coaches are actually co-workers within the hospital. So it's a real life setting where they're doing real jobs side by side with employees. So they may be like in the laundry area, in the cafeteria. I've seen some kids down at Fairfield be in like the communications department. So they just rotate through the hospital, which is great. Eastland also has a program called Employability Prep Program, where kids come to us in the morning. They spend a period or two with classes, and then they get on a bus and they go downtown. And Eastland has several job locations in downtown Columbus. Some of them are at hotels. I know one's at City Kids Child Care, and they spend, I think, about 2.5 hours down there doing work side by side with a real supervisor, and then they come back to Groveport and take another couple classes. So I did want to share too one statistic that the Ohio Longitudinal Transition Study works with all school districts in Ohio, and we over the course of 15 years, they've developed data on what helps kids best transition from school to work or success after high school. And the number one thing is career technical education. The second one is to have real job experience. So we're working with within our own district with our career tech, with Eastland Fairfield, and then also on these real job opportunities. So I think we're doing a great program, and I look forward to building more transition programming with Dale. Thanks.
Keep going. This is special ed committee. Okay, the last thing that we want to talk about is a special ed committee that we put into place with the union 2 years ago. And it's a committee that was developed to support both our ISs, our gen ed teachers, as well as the students. It's made up of 17 team members that range from admin to teachers to ISs to therapists and school psychs that are all on the team. We are scheduled to meet at least 3 times a year. However, I think we've on average been meeting 5 or 6 times. It's a great team. We pretty much meet whenever we realize there's a need. We identify the needs that teachers have based on the school. So we can come in as a team and figure out how to best support the team. And we're making it specific to the school. So we're getting away from the one size fits all. Everybody gets the same PD, whether you need it or not. The next screen just has a list of the people that are actually on the committee. So I just wanted to include that. And lastly, we just want to say, if you go to the last screen, we just want to make sure everybody understands that special ed it's a service, it's not a place. So our whole goal is to support our kids and provide them the support, the instruction that they need so they can be successful just like everybody else. And we're done.
Thank you very much. And move to the next presentation, which is Middle School Central.
Good evening, everybody. How are you? see my colleagues over here, a lot of drivers that we see every day. I just want to compliment you all on things are working pretty well at Central. We're lucky, kind of blessing. So gratitude to the job that you're doing. So thank you. That's called impromptu. That wasn't part of the plan. So I thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk with you about and share some stuff about Middle School Central. It's truly an honor to be able to lead the building and my staff. And I wanted to start off with just really big props to my assistant principal, Mark Selsler, and my school counselor, Michael Coleman. They spent the better part of a month last May really intentionally slotting kids in classes with teachers and then with mixes that really made sense. And so we could get off ground running. Not a whole lot of switching back and forth. It was very data-based. And it was time consuming, it was difficult, it was frustrating at times, but they got the job done, and I'm lucky to have them on my team. So, but let me tell you a little about Middle School Central. If you want to go ahead. You can go ahead. Back up one, sorry. All right. We start every day with our values. On our announcements, we call them the VBO. 4 years ago, our staff and I, during the summer, we came up with some platitudes, or some stalwarts, some foundation. Owning it, being stronger together, and trying to get better every day. And that leads us to the expectations of the building that we also work into our announcements every day at the beginning, at the end of the day. And that's being productive, being respectful, and being safe. A lot of signage going up in the building to remind kids this is what we're all about. This is what the standard that we're holding everybody to, including ourselves. Next, please. A little recap from last year. Although it was a difficult year, we did have some successes. For our map testing in the winter, that was the last session that we did our testing. Our kids show up, well over 90%. We had kids that were CDA last year, and a lot of them came in on buses and did a couple of days worth of testing, and we were able to, it was just seeing the kids come in and being around teachers and then just there for testing, it was a positive. So we came together as a group, as a staff and kids, had over 90% participation on those map tests. And the cool thing was they grew from the fall. We had, go ahead, next slide. 4 of our 6 tested areas, we exceeded the expected growth. All grade levels exceeded the expected growth in math, and we had our 6th graders exceeding growth expectations in reading. So 4 out of 6 in a trying year and circumstances that we're in, our teachers really, really went to the task, took care of business, and so did our kids. So really proud of that. Next, please. All right, our building goals are aligned to what the district goals are. We're trying to get back to those levels that we had in 2018 and 2019. We have some work to do, and that's going to take a lot of fidelity when it comes to our programs. The iReady testing that we're using has been successful already. We've been at it like a week and a half. We have over 90% of our kids tested, and that's really going to set us up to figure out where kids are at, what we need to do, and really get the hard work begun in terms of closing gaps. Our intention when it comes to utilizing systems within the building, MTSS, our Pbis program, our RTI, and what those acronyms mean basically is find kids where they're at, use things that help them close those gaps, and do it in a way where you're treating kids as individuals where they're at. Our mindset is one that we want to keep building on momentum through things that we're doing regarding mindset and just relationship building within the building between the adults and the kids. And I want to really thank the district. They put a lot of time and energy and resources into doing that and putting us in a situation where we know that's important, and efficacy is something that really, really is fluid, and it affects, if you've got it, you're going to pass on to somebody else. Next, please. Academic success, the things that we're really using. I mentioned already, then our TBT process and goals, and just progress monitoring overall. And then we've got those kiddos that aren't performing like they should. We're getting them on plans to progress and to monitor, to see if we can close gaps between where they start and where they end. I think the last couple years with being in and out, that's kind of taken a back seat, and so we really got to get back on the track in terms of getting those kids identified and get them the help they need. And then we also, when we mentioned 2018, 2019, we've got some aggressive, some goals to close those gaps, and this basically outlines how much we have to go this year to just get back to the point we were in 2018, 2019, where we were really trending up. I think we've got the staff in place to be able to do that. I think we've got the motivation to do that. Goes without saying, our staff, they're so excited to have the kids back, have a full building, have a routine, normal type schedule, and just seeing all the kids, all that goes with it, the good, the bad, the challenges. It's good just to be back in the normal. So I'm fingers crossed that we can stay that way and maintain this through the struggle. But we've got this in our sights as a goal and a focus to get it done. Next, please. These are a lot of the programs that we're putting together to use. Some of this is district initiative, and some are tools that our teachers have asked us at a building level to purchase. Our teachers are very innovative. They're able to really adapt to last year in terms of learning lots of different ways to do things with kids and learn programs on the fly. So I'm really confident that these will be used in a way that doesn't take away from the human element, because the biggest thing that we're pushing are relationships with the kids. Kids don't really care what you know. They just want to know that you care. So that's big. Next, please. Our intention success criteria are multi-tiered systems of support, Pbis, and response to intervention, our social emotional learning, our focus groups. A lot of those focus classes are going to be set up to where our school counselors basically set up a program, a plan anyway, where teachers can just look at week 3, Monday or Tuesday, and have something ready to go and ready to use. So teachers have something on point to be able to pull out, talk about with kids, along with just stuff that kids bring in that needs to come out when a teacher invites them to in that kind of setting. And so really the challenge in all that is, on top of everything, is to make kids feel a sense of comfort when it comes to sharing out those kinds of needs, concerns, fears, excitement about successes, celebrations, things that they haven't been able to really do in the past year and a half. Next, please. Our Pbis, common expectations. This is an example of some of the things that are going to be up in the halls, in the bathrooms, in our cafeteria. Just really short, sweet, simple statements that remind kids what the expectations are to be productive, to be respectful, and to be safe. These are things that are going to be lining our buildings. We're fortunate enough to get a nice printer where we can print some banners and things like that. And so we're getting stuff up slowly but surely. But this is something that, even if the signs aren't up, the kids know. This is our Tier 1 tracker. This is a tool that our building came up with and our teachers are using. And the purpose of this is basically to identify some behaviors that maybe aren't so hot, and then have a drop-down menu of things that teachers can do to remedy those problems. And what happens is the teachers will record names, actions, what they did to intervene. And then this is something that Mark and I will review on a daily basis. And then each day I'm calling kids down, talk about this or that, to know there's a united front where we know what's going on. Really powerful, and teachers have really bought into it, done a great job with it. And so we're in the midst of continuing to fine tune it and use it in a way that's productive and positive for our kids. Next. We're about to launch this, our Pbis tracker, where every student's name is going to be on this tracker. And then every teacher that encounters this child will have a chance to provide or award kids a point. And then there's going to be 3 different levels, basically. Once kids reach a certain amount of points for the first level, they get a certain amount of rewards and individual teacher teams are coming up with those kinds of rewards. So it's really going to be grade level based. Teachers going to be running this program in terms of what they reward the kids, but that's going to help to build the relationships. But there's different levels. The better you are, the more you're getting recognized and rewarded. So it's just one of those things where we're pulling out the positives and we're coaching them up when they don't have some of those positive behaviors that they need. So it's likely more of a well-rounded approach. Next. This is my newsletter. Thank you, whoever's idea it was to buy Schmore and the subscription. Thank you, because I couldn't do this at all. So the format is great. It's easy. It's very user-friendly, and it's a real concise way to get and communicate with parents. I'm able to basically tell them what happened during the week, what to expect, things I really want parents to see and watch for. I know this past week I went into classroom to talk about words that are being used that might offend people in terms of their gender, race, or sexuality. And I let parents know, hey, I'm going in this week to talk about stuff like this. You might want to, say stuff at home as well. But the feature I like most about this is that it tracks how many visits or how many times it's been viewed. And each week we average about 1,000 views. So that's really very powerful. And then Mark he'll post stuff on our Facebook page as well. So I know that when I was first starting out as a principal, this was probably a big weakness for me. Again, props for the tools. It helps a lot, and then it makes a difference because parents are reading it. So one thing it's also led to is a lot of emails from kids and then parents, because I put that contact information on that newsletter. And so it's like the channels are very open, and people don't think twice about emailing me. Our mindset criteria basically is just an advocation of the expectations, and the whole rationale behind it is for it to be safe, productive, and just a good place to be. I want kids to be happy coming in. I want teachers to be happy coming in. I want them to come in liking work, and then that to show in their performance and how they get along throughout the day. Now, we're going to have those days, of course, where we get to take those steps back. We got to reload and refresh and things like that. But for the most part, I see the teachers embracing this approach at this point. I think we're just grateful to be back in general. So it's really kind of amping us up when it comes to staying positive. And then we've got a panorama survey that we're going to do here soon in the fall to gauge things like efficacy, sense of belonging, and just how much you fit in as a kid. We'll have the student side and the teacher side, so I'm going to be very interested to see where we are starting off in the fall. I know last spring we kind of took a dip. It was a tough spring. We made some changes in staffing and just the ways we were doing things in the middle school, so that was kind of a dip when it came to morale. But we rebounded. And then the kids, it was just a tough spring. So it's one of those things where we're back to normal, and we're happy to be together, and we're learning how to be together again. So I'm hoping those trends go back to being more positive. Next. On our staff day, I did something with the staff called Fish Philosophy, and it's about this fish market in Seattle who have a really unique approach to work and to life. And 4 big principles: being there for each other, a sense of play, being free to take risks, just going in with an attitude of making someone's day, and just overall just choosing your attitude. However you come into a day and approach a day is up to you. And so the teachers, it was just a really, really positive day. They really appreciated it. The participation was great. The feedback was great. And I'm hoping as we work through the year, we just remind teachers of these principles, and it filters down to the kids. So, like I said, I want Central to be a place that you really wanting to come to every day. Next. This is our panorama data, our teacher efficacy, how well they think they did with their job and how they performed, actually went up. So that's a good thing, considering that they took on so much in terms of new technology and software, things like that. Next, our students kind of stayed the same, dipped a little bit. So we're really going to be looking to see that rebounds right back up. So that's our push. And right now, I just think the appreciation to have everyone back is going to help a lot. Next. And all these best practices are, and when it comes down to it, it's all about the kids. It's for them. So everything that we do, we're wanting to see a lot of this, a lot of smiles, even with the masks. And at this point, I'm sensing that vibe, and the goal is just to keep it and maintain it. So want to thank you for all the support and all the tools you're giving us. We're doing the best job that we can with everything that you've provided, and I'm looking forward to good things. So any questions?
I just had one question on the parent-teacher conferences. Last year you offered the remote. Are you going to be able to do that this time?
I think we're gonna leave that. We're gonna focus on having parents in. If they feel more comfortable doing it virtually, that's another option. I know that the participation took a big step up because that was an option. But there are parents that want to come in and just talk to you face to face, and teachers are like that as well. We're going to approach that just as kind of a servant, where we're going to serve our customer base the way they need to. We just want to be able to share information the way that works for them.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Good question.
And you said your staff was here. Could they? You said staff was here.
What's that?
You said your staff was here.
I was calling out my bus colleagues. I recognize
okay.
a few of the folks out here
Okay.
that I see every day and in the parking lot, and I was just commenting on the fact that the process at Central, as far as the busing goes, for whatever reason, it's working out really smoothly right now. So we're thankful, and I know there's a lot of behind the scenes work that you're all doing, so it's appreciated. Big game this Sunday. Go Browns. Thank you.
Thank you. And we go to the next is elementary education.
Hello, Board President, Superintendent Ogden, and distinguished board members. Thank you for letting me present today to tell you about what we are doing at the elementary education level to meet our district goals. The good thing is Mr. Brown kind of stole my thunder because you're going to hear a lot of the same. So I'm going to be able to go really, really quick for you this evening because he's already talked a lot of the things that we're doing. And I just echo that that's great district alignment. So we'll go from there. All right. We all start, can we go to the next? We all start with AIM, as you know. We definitely want every student, every lesson, every day to be our mantra as we work on our academics, our mindset, and our intention. Next slide. You will see that we are definitely working on the whole child as we're using the Department of Ed's framework, and we are definitely hitting many points in elementary education across the different domains of the whole child. Next. So our academic goal as a district, as you know, is to increase our academics. We really want to get back to that 18-19 threshold. And what does that mean exactly for the elementary level? So on the presentation you have in front of you, I know it's kind of small up there, but we have to increase about 30% proficient across the board in reading and math to get us back to where we were in 18-19. So we have had quite a slip, but we have great structured ways to get there, and we know we can because we do really hard things. Next slide. So some of the things that we are doing on this literacy curriculum where kids are reading and reading a lot of good literature. We have also brought in a new reading assessment called the Next Step Guided Reading Assessment for all K-5. This helps us progress monitor our kids. This helps every quarter. We are checking to see where our students are, where do we need to adapt our instruction, and how can we best meet the needs of our students. And that's standard across all elementaries. The other thing that we're doing is really put a big focus on the guided reading framework. We're using Jan Richardson's guided reading framework. We have trained all staff in it, as well as our administrators and our new instructional coaches that I'll talk about. Next, we have 3 instructional coaches this year that are really going to help support our teachers to continue to improve and continue to use their high quality student data to meet the needs of students. And then the other thing that we're doing, oh, go back one. Thanks. The other thing we're doing is we have developed a lot of partnerships. We are working with the Columbus Metro Library. We've had reading buddies. They have the homework helpline. They brought the bookmobile to Cruiser Connect. We are also working with the ACE program and the Always With Us charities for our academic loss. We hope to be launching on September 28th an after school tutoring program and athletics kind of SEL program with the partnership with ACE. Next slide. So for our district intention goal, as you know, we really want to make sure that we're using those multi-tiered systems of support, as Mr. Brown was discussing. And we really want to make sure that our students are getting their social emotional needs met, as well as they're getting progress monitored to making sure they are moving and progressing across all different things, such as social emotional learning, and some strategies that we use for that are next slide. So our Pbis program, you saw that Mr. Brown put up his school expectations. So in our Pbis program, all our elementaries have very clear expectations. I've given you the example of Groveport stars. We've also have implemented student recognition programs, and 3 of our elementaries have won awards for their Pbis program, either the bronze, gold, or silver award. We have also increased social workers this year. Yay! For all of our students that need some additional support. We have also brought in, we've used Second Step before, but we also brought in the DOTS program this year, which is another social emotional learning program, kind of more geared to like our K-3 level. We are continuing to focus on the response intervention process, making sure that we are a fine oil machine on looking at our data, looking at how our students are progressing, and continuing to respond to the data that we're seeing and change our instruction. We are also using our TBT teams as well as our data hub, which is the student success platform that this is now the 3rd year for that. Okay, next slide. Our mindset goal, as you know, our mindset goal is about teacher efficacy, as Mr. Brown was talking about the teacher efficacy. And we really want our teachers and our students to feel confident in their ability and their belief that they can reach the goals that we set for them. We really want our teachers to know that they have the support to meet all students' needs. Because especially, well, I think it's across the whole district, but in elementary, you could be in a 2nd grade classroom and have some student that's on the preschool level and some kid that's at a 4th grade level. And you really have to be almost a magician to be able to differentiate and meet all students' needs. And so we really want our teachers to feel efficacious, that they can do that and that they have the tools that they need to do that. So to accomplish this goal at the elementary level, you're going to see the fish philosophy that Mr. Brown was just talking about. We're also, those are our 3 elementary coaches, Ashley, Jessica, and Rachel, that we're very excited about, that are new additions to support our staff. And then we're also partnering with Panorama, who does our student success, as well as our SEL survey data. And we're partnering with their teaching and learning team to bring in the equity and inclusivity, professional development, and the work around equity. Next slide. Or is that it? I think that's it. All right. Any questions? Like I said, you're going to see a lot of what Mr. Brown did.
Any questions?
And this box that was 7 minutes and 36 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will now move to item F, Superintendent's agenda.
Yes, for this item, I would like to recommend that the Groveport Madison Board of Education approve the $85,222.66 quote from EPS, which is our current provider, who will do the installation of the card readers at the schools and to make sure that all the equipment is working. This will allow for card swipes for the readers at the doors, upgrades, and computer equipment at the sites.
Could I have a motion, please?
So moved. This is Nancy. This is Latoya. Second motion.
Any questions?
This is Kathy. I have a question. Did we receive any other quotes for this project?
Scott, I'm going to let you answer that. This is your department.
We did not, because we currently use EPS to do about 60% of our buildings. So this is just adding on schools that don't currently have door swipes. So to go to a different company would mean we would have had to do the whole district, which would have been astronomical in cost. So we're just looking at doing the buildings that currently do not have door swipes and adding on to some buildings that just have a couple.
So aren't we required to receive 3 quotes on any bid over 50,000?
Felicia, that would be you.
I'd have to look for sure at our board policy.
I
what
think
the
that's if
amount
we're using
is.
federal funds. Are these federal funds or are these general funds?
These are our general funds.
So that is why general funds have a procurement code. And I mean, federal funds do, general funds do not. Is that correct?
Well, right. There are different guidelines for procurement for federal funds. We do have in our board policy about obtaining quotes. I'm just not competitive quotes. I don't know immediately what the dollar amount is, and there are some exceptions to that.
When do they want to do the work?
We can start doing the work as soon as we get approval. I mean, they can go in and start working in the next couple weeks.
Can we put this off till next month and then get 3 more quotes from people who want to do all 11 of our buildings?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, Chris.
Hey, let's get some more quotes. See who wants to do all of our buildings and see if they can come in lower than somebody who wants to do half of our buildings.
Doing all the buildings would mean they'd come and get the equipment, take all the equipment out, redo all the equipment in the 11 buildings.
And then
Is that right?
yeah.
So they're going to find somebody who's going to want to do all 11 buildings cheaper.
While Kathy's looking that up, is some of this is ESSER money though? Is that what I'm reading here? No.
Not this project. This project is general fund.
I believe it's policy number 6320, purchasing and bidding. It requires 3 bids. Maybe we should table this. I move that we table this until the next meeting. Do we have a motion on the table now to table it?
We have a motion?
We have a motion and a second to pass this.
Yes,
I
we
think
do.
that we have a motion to also find out why the document says that there's X's on the document that said ESSER 3. If we could just clarify that.
Yeah, thank you.
The treasurer's office will have to answer that. I don't know that. I don't do the money.
It was originally proposed as part of the ESSER 3, but as we aggregated all of our ideas and brainstorming together, there wasn't enough money to include this with some other higher priority projects.
So if our board policy is to receive 3 quotes for anything over 50,000, then I don't see how we cannot do that. We have to follow our bylaws, our policies.
I was trying to look it up. There are certain exclusions to board policy, specifically technology. So I would guess that's the case, but I was trying to get to the policy to take
That's
a
why
look
I was
at that.
trying to read it. I didn't have, couldn't read it fast
And
enough
I was
as we
in the
were
same
going
boat
through all of
reading
this.
it.
Yeah, why was this not brought up to the board, or to the superintendent prior to the board meeting? We have requested that those types of things come up prior. We've talked about it in multiple meetings.
Bring it up when? To the other board members. The board meetings, when you bring up things. That's what I'm doing. Are you saying you don't want me to bring that up? I don't understand.
No,
I didn't have time. I didn't see it. I wasn't at my computer. I don't sit at my computer, Libby, all day.
When you reviewed the
I
documents.
just noticed this, you know. What is the? I don't understand what the problem is.
The discussion before was to have no surprises.
Oh, and I'm just reading the policy, and I guess if we'd had the question in advance, we could have looked at the policy and addressed that the price quotations indicate that except in cases of that we would get 3 quotes, except in cases of emergency or when the materials purchased are of such a nature that price negotiations would not result in savings to the district. And so that's the situation that we're in.
And exactly why I'm making the recommendation and why we gave you the quote. This is a situation that if we went with another vendor, it would cost the district more money, or I would not bring a recommendation to the board that was not wise and smart to do.
So we have a to table, so we need to have a vote on whether to table. So Madam Treasurer, could you do that vote, please?
Mrs. Walsh?
Could you repeat the vote, please?
This is your motion.
The motion to table.
Yeah, I vote yes.
Mrs. Gillespie?
No.
Mrs. Gray?
No.
Mrs. Dowdellberger?
No.
Mr. Snyder?
No.
Could we have a roll call for the original motion, please?
Mrs. Gillespie?
Aye.
Mrs. Dowdellberger?
Aye.
Mrs. Gray?
Aye.
Mrs. Walsh?
No.
Mr. Snyder?
Aye.
Motion is carried. We will move to item G, the treasurer's agenda.
All right. Scott, can you go to page 4 of that document? We'll try to give you an abbreviated version here. The August revenues were down 8.6 million compared to August of last year. And this is a timing difference. You might recall last month we were way high because of receiving our real estate taxes. We see our state aid is down, and that is the anticipated decrease with the new state funding formula, because students that are enrolled elsewhere will now be funded at those other schools.
Excuse me, I have a question. So then that offsets our expenditures then, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
It does.
All right, thanks.
Yep, and you'll see that in 2 places tonight. Okay. And then let's go to the top of page 5. If we're still comparing to the May forecast, because not all the elements in the new funding have been, the exact calculations have been shared with us. We're expecting that by mid-October. But if we compare to the May forecast, our revenue is favorable, and some of those monthly timing differences start to level out. And if trends hold true, we should be about 190,000 higher than currently projected for a total annual revenue of 88.8 million. Then if we go to page 6, Scott, on our expenses, we see expenses are higher for the month of August by 210,000. Most of that is being driven by the other expenses category, which includes the annual transfers that the board will be seeing and approving for our debt service and future obligations such as severance. And then let's go to top of page 7. If we look at that as in the forecast, then forecasted expenses could be about 3.5 million less than what we were forecasting in May. I do expect some of this will level out with the new formula, and that we will actually see our services and our salaries go up, and that'll really eliminate a lot of that projection. Any questions on the monthly activity?
When are they going to be actually telling us how much state aid we're going to be getting? When is the state supposed to be sharing that information?
Oh, well, we have simulations. I don't think I have it in this month's report. I had it in last month's report. I think it's about $5.6 million higher than what we received this past year.
Yeah, I think I'm just having trouble getting my head around that money going out where the child is educated. So I'll just be looking more carefully at that.
Yeah, you'll see it in our annual appropriations. Actually, it's the next item on the agenda. You'll see, so revenue, and I'm sorry, I don't have it for you this month, but I did have it in last month's report, the simulations, where we could see the projected revenue and then trying to equalize it with less expense as well. And it is, I get the confusion because it's a lot of moving parts on both sides, revenue and expense. But if we look at our appropriations, I actually have a motion to recommend that the board approve the fiscal 22 permanent appropriations and estimated resources, and further authorize me to submit them to the Franklin County Auditor.
Could I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
And I'll second it. This is Nancy.
Any questions?
I would just like to show, it's in the very back of the financial report. I was fishing for it myself here earlier.
Thank you. I was trying to find it.
Yes, it's right there.
It's the second to the last page or so. So where you see the impact, Mrs. Gillespie, of we're no longer paying for the tuition that's going out to educate our resident students attending elsewhere, is in the general fund appropriation. When we approved fiscal 21, the spending was $86 million. This year, I'm asking the board for spending authority at $75 million. So it's actually over $10 million of tuition paid out we will not be paying.
Right.
So it's huge. That's a really great change.
And am I right that before, and the old way of doing it was we would pay out the full amount, but the state would only give us a portion because we were limited, correct?
That's exactly right.
So it was like $8,000 we paid out, but the state only gave us maybe 7,000.
Right, that's close. Yeah, it was, so the state would fund us a per pupil amount at 6,600, but that per pupil amount is actually reduced for our local property values, a portion of our wealth based on income. So what we actually got funded per pupil was a lot less. And yet what we had to pay to the other school is the full 6,600.
Yeah.
So a lot of local revenue left with that student as well.
Right.
So now funding students where they attend versus where they live is better for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yep, you're welcome. And so that's the appropriations. We just talked about the general fund, but you see the fund level for each of the district's funds for a total of 130.7 million. And the main point with that spending then is the other report is our estimated resources and all of our sources of revenue that you would be authorizing. And then these are presented to the county auditor for certification. And here our general fund revenue is 117 million. So we're not planning to spend all of the revenue that we will take in the year. Any questions?
No. So we got roll call?
Mr. Snyder?
Aye.
Mrs. Gillespie?
Aye.
Mrs. Walsh?
Aye.
Mrs. Gray?
Aye.
Mrs. Dowdell-Berger?
Aye.
Motion is carried. We move to item H, the consent agenda. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved. This is Latoya Dowdell-Berger.
I'll second it.
We laugh because they did never get her name correct on the closed captioning. It's always a question as to how it's going to come across. Is there any questions? Madam Treasurer, could we have roll call, please?
Yes. May I check that was Mrs. Gillespie first and
Yep.
Mrs. Dowdell-Berger second? No. Who was it? Chris? Okay, I'm sorry.
Latoya was first, Chris second.
Oh. Mrs. Dowdell-Berger?
Aye.
Mr. Snyder?
Aye.
Mrs. Walsh?
Aye.
Mrs. Gillespie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gray?
Aye. Motion is carried. We will now move to, where is it? Item I, board items, and it's the Board of Education Evaluation facilitated by OSBA. Take care. I believe so. It's out here in open session. Oh no, this is just my copies. This stuff that I'm preparing. Of course.
Good evening. How are you? Hi. It's my pleasure to be with you here this evening. My name is Cheryl Ryan, and I am the Director of Board and Management Services at the Ohio School Boards Association. I have met many of you personally on a number of occasions over the years, but for those that I have never met before. It's my pleasure to be with you. I was contacted, OSBA was contacted by your board, by Ms. Gray predominantly, to come and talk to you a little bit about evaluation and why it's important and how best to do it as a governance body. I did ask before coming in the last several days, I asked each of the board members to answer a couple of questions for me to kind of gauge your particular challenges or your particular, the things that you are most proud of, etc. And I do want to say I really appreciate all 5 of you responding. That doesn't always happen. You know, when I ask a board to give me some feedback, I don't always get all 5 board members responding. So that speaks very well for you. I also want to say before I get started that this presentation is very much linked in its success, not just the presentation success, but the content of that presentation, its success, in how well a district abides by its strategic plan. And so the cockles of my heart have been warmed this evening as I heard you talk about your vision and your board norms and your belief for students and some of those things. As your faculty and your principals talked about alignment with the district's goals, that is all very good and goes to work in your favor in terms of your ability to work together as a board. I've been doing board facilitation for about 15 years. I'm a former board member myself, and I think I have come across lots of situations across the state of Ohio with boards who are doing well and boards who are not doing so well, and superintendents who are struggling and superintendents and treasurers who are really surpassing all of our expectations. So I think one of your principals and maybe one of your directors said it best, that 2020, 2019-20, 2020-21 have been probably among the most difficult years for school boards ever, and not just in the state of Ohio, but across the country. So the fact that you are still here and still standing speaks very well for you as well. I do hope that we could suspend some of the formality that you have at your board meeting, and would just ask that if I say anything as we talk that you have a question about or a comment or you disagree, I hope you'll tell me. And we can have a conversation about that. I generally am not going to, I will tell you if I'm telling you something that is legal, okay? There's a difference between what is law and what is best practice. I like to share best practice. I like to share with you the benefit of what other districts have found to be helpful in terms of their governance. But if you are doing something in Groveport, Madison that is the cruiser way and works for the cruisers, and it's not illegal and it's not unethical and it works for you, I'm happy to tell you to continue to make that work for you. So with that said, I'll just start and we'll see where we go, okay? All righty. So Ms. Gray predominantly asked about doing evaluation, and so I wanted to start with the importance of high quality evaluation in board governance and why it matters, how it is defined according to Ohio Revised Code, a little bit about the superintendent and treasurer standards. A lot of times our communities don't know that there are defined superintendent and treasurer standards for evaluation for superintendents and treasurers across our state. And then the Board of Education standards. We developed at the Ohio School Boards Association some years ago a set of standards for school board members as they self-assess, and then a suggested calendar at the end. So some of the things, and I'll try and move fairly quickly, and unless you want to jump in. So I know that you've had a long meeting and everybody's evenings are short. So evaluation allows for specific discussion related to stated goals and objectives. So should you all have stated goals and objectives as a district, which it sounds very much from your presentations tonight like you do, and stated goals and objectives for the board, your conversations about evaluation should be about those goals and objectives. And your job as a board is to make sure that you stay on track with evaluating the things that you said at the beginning of the year were going to be important to you. Evaluation allows the board to evaluate and discuss how well they're working as a team, how they understand more about their role as governors as opposed to administrators' role as managers in the district. We'll talk a little bit about that. and allows the leadership team to better communicate your successes and your challenges with your community. Some of the things you've talked about tonight related to budget and special education, the needs of students. I love the fact that your middle school principal is using a new tool to communicate to parents, a weekly newsletter. That kind of thing, it can all be evaluated very specifically on an annual basis, and it allows for greater levels of transparency and accountability in the district. This is what the Ohio Revised Code says about evaluation. This is how much help that they give you as school board. They tell you that you need to evaluate, and specifically that you need to evaluate on an annual basis your superintendent and your treasurer. You do not need to evaluate yourselves as a board. So boards that are introspective enough and are willing to look at the way that the 5 of you are working together, with the 5 of you, and the way the 5 of you are working with your superintendent and treasurer, which I refer to as the leadership team, that speaks well for your board as well. You cannot move the children in Groveport, Madison forward from the bottom up. It has to be a top down. Your teachers, your staff, your bus drivers, your principals, everybody else can be working as hard as they possibly can work. But if the 7 of you, with your assistant superintendents and directors of curriculum and special ed and all that kind of thing, if all of you can't work together well, it makes it very difficult for those downstream to work well too. So evaluation though for board members can be difficult because most board members are not educational administrators. So the example I always use is my job at OSBA. My CEO at OSBA used to do what I do a long time ago. He knows what I do, and it's easy for him to evaluate me. Most of us in our private lives work in organizations where our bosses really understand what our job is all about. When you become a board member, that's just usually not true. We have board members who are teachers, current teachers in other districts, or former teachers. We have a few board members who are former superintendents, but that's pretty rare. Most of us work in private industry, or we work in the nonprofit, or we're social workers, or we're farmers, or something like that. And we don't know on an hourly basis or even a daily basis what superintendents do and what their life is like and what treasurers do and what their life is like. And then all of a sudden we are asked to come together and decide how kind of a job they're doing. The superintendent and treasurer do deserve agreed upon and prioritized goals and objectives. So we're going to talk about how I would suggest you set up a calendar at the end of this for this kind of conversation, but it happens all the time in Ohio that a board member calls me in April or May and says we're getting ready to evaluate our superintendent, and we're all on very different pages about what was important about his work this year. And I will always ask, well, what was the prioritized list of performance objectives you all agreed on 9 or 10 months ago? And 9 out of 10 times that board member will tell me we didn't have one. So my question is always, how can you evaluate this person on a year's worth of work if you didn't decide at the beginning of the year what it was going to be important for you for him to accomplish? Fair and consistent evaluation supports their growth and good succession. And good evaluations build trust in the community. If you can all come forward as a board and say, we evaluated ourselves, we evaluated our superintendent, we evaluated our treasurer, we agreed on the list of things that they did incredibly well. We talked about the list of challenges they had that weren't expected. Hello, COVID. And we talked about the things that we did talk about at the beginning of the year that we didn't get enough traction on that we would like to correct over the course of the next year. So these are the superintendent and treasurer standards. So they're similar in Ohio for the 2 administrators most key to the board, but they are a little bit different. The superintendent ones are on the top. Communication, you'll see, is in for both the treasurer and the superintendent. It is one of the standards. The treasurer has some more operational and what I would call operational standards in terms of facilities, property, and asset management. They both want collaboration. They both talk about vision in one way, shape, or form. And instruction is certainly in the list for the superintendent. So, working within the standards, we want to align that with Groveport Madison's mission, which is to build a community of learners, leaders, and responsible students. your vision statement of every student, every lesson, every day. So as a board, what I would want you to attempt to do at the beginning of the year is to sit down with your superintendent and your treasurer, and you'll see, I would ask them first to start a list of the 3 or 4 key performance objectives that they would like to accomplish in the year. And if you already do that, kudos to you. I would then want a conversation as a group of 5 with your superintendent and then with your treasurer on how those objectives align with the 5 standards. So for Ms. Ogden, I would probably say, let's just say one of her goals is to raise the reading score at the middle school by 4%. And that's a very specific objective. And certainly I would look back at the standards and I would say it certainly ties to instruction. It probably ties to resources because there's probably some professional development in there. How she's going to communicate with staff about that, how staff are going to communicate with parents. So that simple objective could certainly align with at least 3 of those superintendent standards. Your belief statement is a fantastic one. I loved it when I found this when I was preparing, that all cruisers are valuable. And I read that as an outsider in your community. I read that to mean all cruisers, meaning my staff, my cafeteria workers, my parents, my board members, my students, certainly not least, and my parents. All of us that are in the Groveport, Madison greater community are valuable. And just stating that up front is a very conscious statement of where you are as a district. Unconditionally serve, unconditionally support, and unconditionally inspire. So your belief statement is really a strong one, and the fact that you read that at the beginning of your board meeting was very impressive to me. Dr. Robert Marzano is a well-known educational researcher, and I really like a lot of the work he does, and I use a lot of his quotes. But this quote basically says that you have to lead as a team. The state of Ohio does say very definitively that nothing you do as individual board members counts once the vote is taken. Your opinions tonight as you debated things like safety measures in your buildings in terms of card swipers or budget issues or whatever, that discussion, coming to your board meeting and having that individual discussion is really valuable. That is where your individual thought and your individual opinion really matters. But once the vote is taken, that should subside. And only the votes that stand on the record and in the minutes that your treasurer is taking are the votes that really count. So Marzano is one of the people that really has advanced the notion of board governance as a team and as a collaborative effort, and I really appreciate most of his work. So here are the Board of Education standards, which is really where I wanted to spend some time tonight. So responsible governance, communication of and commitment to high expectations, which you echo in your belief statement. Creation of district-wide conditions for student and staff success, the fact of you supporting through resources, physical, emotional, mental, and instructional, the staff and the work they're doing with your students. District accountability in all areas. We'll talk about what that means for the board, and then engaging your community members. So your role as a board is policy making. You talked about one of your policies tonight, your policy about purchasing. Your policy is really important to your district, and it's really important that you follow it. I like the fact that you were able to put your hands on it relatively quickly and clarify some questions. Paired with administrative procedures, that is the way Groveport Madison perceives the policy. There are a lot of districts in Ohio that will have the same exact policies. Some policies every district has. But the administrative procedures are different for every district, and that would be what I would say is the Groveport Madison way, your administrative procedure. Your job, definitely according to the revised code, is to evaluate, as I said. The code's relatively silent on how you do that. You are communicators. Your job, you all live in the district. By law, all 5 board members must live in your school district. It is not the law that a lot of your administrators, staff, and even superintendent and treasurer live in the district. In most districts, superintendent does live in the district, but it's not always the case. And many times the treasurer lives outside the district. So your role as communicators, with your administrators about what you're hearing from neighbors and families and people across the state, across the street, is really important, and even across the state. For those of you that work in committees, statewide committees, or talk with other board members and are networked with other board members, those conversations are also important to your superintendent and your treasurer. You are advisors to those people, and I hope you take that role seriously. You can advise individually, but the best advice they get is advice that comes about from the conversation at a board meeting. So, good governance utilizes vision and goals, adheres really consistently to policy. I have board members call me a lot, and they'll have a situation with a parent who's kicking up dust. I'm sure that never happens in Groveport, Madison, that you get calls or you get emails from parents who are concerned about something. But you have a parent or a staff member who's upset about something. The policy is your armor. Consult it, live with it, be excited about it, because it allows you to be fair and consistent and to know you're being fair, consistent, ethical, and legal with everyone in your community. Equity and equality as it relates to the policy is really important. So we don't want favoritism in a district. We don't want certain students to have standards that other students don't have, etc. The policy is what allows you as a board to come together and be unified behind one answer. We saw examples of that this evening as well. And then you respect your board set protocols. So your norms, as you read them tonight before your meeting, you respect those, and that allows or helps for good governance. This doesn't mean that you're not always going to have problems, right? You're going to disagree on stuff. That's okay. You're going to have very different passions and very different ideas about what is right for your students, and that is okay too. I believe that actually adds to the conversation, right? So if the board packet goes out at the beginning of the meeting and your superintendent doesn't hear from any of you, and she might assume that you're all going to be like-minded about issues at the meeting. I do believe that if the board packet goes out and one of you has a question, or is, even if it's a call to the superintendent that says, just want you to let you know that item 4 is something that I've got questions about, and I'm going to bring them up tonight, or I'm going to bring them up on Wednesday night. You need to be prepared. That's really helpful. But do we always refer to policy during discussions or when making decisions? So I heard you do some of that tonight. What does our policy say? Should always be your first question when you have a challenge. It allows you, again, to be consistent and fair, and that it does allow you to stay in governance mode rather than get down in the weeds, which is the job of your superintendent and treasurer. It's to be in the weeds. We're going to talk a little bit about building trust based on your roles. And so when a board member first becomes a board member and they call me on the phone, or we have our very first workshop, they get elected in January and take office in January. Understanding the difference between policy and process is the hardest thing for the board, and it is what keeps some boards from staying in governance mode. Policy is your job. The 5 of you, your job is policy. It is written and or approved by the board. So when you approve policy, please take it seriously. That is your job according to the state of Ohio. The process is what your administrators then generally design and put into practice. And that's the Groveport Madison way of how you're going to make this policy live. So when the state makes rules, as they did several years ago, the example that's easy for me to pull out of the air is there was new legislation on how we were going to store and administer insulin to our students who are insulin dependent, diabetic students. And there was new legislation about that. And so then the legislature said, we are requiring all districts to have a policy about how you're going to do this. And in some districts, the administrative procedure, which the superintendent, treasurer, principals all probably got together and determined, was that we're going to have a nurse in every building do that. In some districts where they don't have a nurse in every building, it was going to be the principal was going to be trained to do that, or somebody else was going to be trained to do that. So the way you do that is the process, and that is not the board's job. And this is not to say that the board isn't interested in the process and that there isn't conversation at the board meeting about the process, but the policy itself is what is the board's job. So these are some of the questions that I like to hear at board meetings that tells me that the board is thinking in governance mode. Can we afford it? Will our community support it? Can we sustain it? Have we done the due diligence necessary that says this is right for Groveport, Madison? Why do we know this is right? How will we know it's working? How long are we going to give this before we decide, before we make some decisions on whether it's working or not? Your teaching and learning person tonight talked a lot about reading programs and some of the new Pbis programs that you're doing. The board, I hope, asks some questions, or it will be free in the future to ask some questions about what is the timeline on those? When are we going to ask the superintendent to give us some information about how well these new things are working? It's fantastic to hear about new stuff, but it's important for the board to know that it's working or to hear from staff when they have challenges. These are the kinds of questions that I like to hear administrators talk about after the board meeting. The board has asked us to do this. Which administrator should take the lead? These are not the kinds of questions that we generally hear at a lot of board meetings or should hear at a lot of board meetings. Which building should go first? Which teacher is the best to lead that effort? Sometimes the board will ask the question of the superintendent or the treasurer. Which company have you selected? What are you thinking about doing in that area? And that kind of discussion is okay. But making decisions about these questions is an administrative responsibility and not a governance one. In terms of curriculum instruction, I just gave a list here. The difference between the board and the superintendent and some of the things. The board, again, establishes the vision. The board might very well be the ones to say, you know what, a 30% drop in our MAP score in this area isn't acceptable. We need to see that rebound by at least 5% by the end of this academic year. That is a great board mandate, and that's something real and tangible that the superintendent can take back to her team and say the board needs us to improve by at least 5%. How are we going to get it? How are we going to do that? So the board establishes the vision, establishes the goal line, establishes the parameters, and then asks the administrators to come back and tell us how we're going to do that. Yeah.
Can that also be done during their evaluation where we're setting their new goals?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And I would,
because that's typically how we kind of do that.
I think that's great. I would hope that the performance objectives and the goals that the superintendent and the treasurer set for themselves and that are reviewed and approved by the board are quite specific. Communicate better with families, I don't like. I think it's nice, but how that's going to happen, how much and when, that's what we want to see. So this is the way the board and the superintendent sort of should divide their strengths and their abilities related to curriculum and instruction. District accountability, another board standard for evaluation related to the personnel. In general, in Ohio, the board does nothing in terms of who is hired in the district with the exception of the superintendent and the treasurer. Now, you actually do vote to approve the hires that are recommended by your superintendent and the retentions that are recommended by your superintendent, but you act on personnel matters in terms of a vote. You generally do not get involved in who is hired. And I always will have at least, 40 conversations a year with board members who want to get involved in personnel decisions. There's several reasons why it's a really bad idea. The main ones are that when the board gets involved in a hire and then problems happen with the hire, the district becomes liable a lot of times for things. Another reason is it messes up the chain of command, and that's probably the most common reason. But the board should not be involved in personnel with the exception of superintendent and treasurer when that person needs to be hired. Yes, question.
But is it okay and appropriate for a board member to sit on a committee for hiring a person in the district, like a football coach or a principal or assistant principal as a community member?
I think it's the same thing. I think that it is best for the board to keep their hands off a hire until they approve the hire. Now, this does not mean that they're not going to ask questions, right? So superintendent, please tell us a little bit about the 3 finalists for the position and why you're recommending A over C or C over B or whatever it is. I think that's totally legitimate. sitting on the interview committee, again, allows a board to insert him or herself into the process, and it turns that chain of command inside out, and it's not a great situation. We actually had a situation in Southeast Ohio regarding a football coach. Board members insisted being part of the interview committee, forwarded a couple of their prime choices to the superintendent, that kind of backed him into a corner about the two choices that the board members favored. He chose one of them, and 18 months later, there was a sexual harassment investigation, and the board ended up paying out quite a bit in terms of a suit, because the board actually was called on the carpet for making that decision. So we want the board to stay out of personnel to the extent possible. And your legal counsel would probably give you the same advice. But if you ever want to sit in on an interview committee, I would ask you to just consult your legal counsel. Budget and finance. So the board, this is where the Ohio Revised Code loves the board to get involved and to be very aware of your checkbook, to understand where your money is coming from. Felicia, Ms. Drummond, you talked tonight about the sources of revenue. I always found when I was a board member that my community would often ask me questions about the budget, but most community members don't understand how little or how much of that budget comes from different sources. So I think that pie chart is a really important thing for you to share with the community. I'm sure you do that already. For instance, most community members don't understand how little of the budget actually comes from the state and how much of the budget comes from the local taxpayer, or how little comes from the federal government. In the average district in Ohio, less than 3% of their overall budget comes from the federal government. So here are some of the things the board is responsible for and the treasurer is responsible for. So the board is going to establish parameters and priorities for the district. You're going to tell your treasurer what you hope will happen with the budget this year in terms of how much cash you have in the bank, how much cash you keep in the bank, what the priorities are in the district for spending, what the priorities are in the district for saving. And certainly the board has to make the difficult calls when and if you have to make the call about raising new funds. So the board meeting. You talked tonight about board meeting agendas. So I just wanted to make a couple comments. One of the board members was asked about whether or not that question could have come up previous to the board meeting and how you can get something on the agenda. So Ms. Walsh, just to address your concern tonight about eliminating a piece of the agenda where you generally had kind of, it sounds to me like a sort of broad-based comments from the board. There are districts that do have that on their agenda. Most do not. Reasons to have that on the agenda is that it allows board members to be interactive. Reasons to not have that on the agenda is that most often your administrators, your superintendent and treasurer in particular, are going to want to be prepared to answer your questions. And oftentimes those board member comments catch them flat-footed. I think that's the phrase. So making sure all 5 of you, though, are free and know that you are encouraged to contact your board president or your superintendent after your preliminary budget agenda comes out. And how far ahead of the board meeting is that usually? Friday. So you've had 5 days or 4 days or 5 days. And letting the superintendent know. I have a question about the limit on procurement and when we have to get a bid. I have a question on why we're having 3 academic presentations tonight instead of, I'd really like to hear from our transportation supervisor, whatever it might be. Those are the kinds of things that you should notify your board president and or your superintendent ahead of time about. And then what I would also ask is that the board president be open to feedback from all board members about adding things to the agenda. So it's a difficult thing if a board member contacts the board president and says, I'd really like more information. I'd like to have an agenda item to talk about X on the agenda. And if that person gets shut down all the time, that's not healthy either. So if you provide a way for all board members to be heard on the agenda, make sure you utilize that path. Does public participation go smoothly? I saw it go really smoothly tonight. Is that generally your case here? I like the fact that you have a 3-minute window. That's awesome. I like the fact that it didn't look to me like you have like an egg timer and a hook wasn't going to come out and pull somebody off. But I do encourage you to be consistent. So make sure you don't cut off the person that's upset with you, and allowing the person that's got the pom-poms out for the board to go about 7 or 8 minutes. Discussions and conversations respectful always. I will tell board members all the time in workshops and on the phone, there isn't a single conversation you can have as a board that is an appropriate conversation that can't be done professionally, right? If it has to get personal and nasty, it's probably not appropriate for the board work anyway. So if you ever need help in framing a conversation, all of us at OSBA would be happy to help you there. How often do you go into executive session? How many meetings? Most meetings? I think that's probably fairly common to go into executive session. Do you feel like you use it appropriately and for the right reasons? So Ohio allows us, you all know this, relatively little opportunity to go into executive session, right? So it's important that you go there for the right reasons and that your community trusts that when you're in executive session to talk about negotiations, for example, that's what you talk about. You talk about negotiations. You're not talking about the football coach, for example. Decisions should always be made on the issue or challenge and not on the person, right? If somebody is upset about your mask policy, for example, it shouldn't matter whether or not he or she is the richest person in the district or the least financially secure person in the district. Are there questions or issues related to voting or voting outcomes? So do you ever have problems? Does your community worry when you don't have 5-0 votes? No? Yeah. I'm not an advocate of a board that's always a 5-0 voter. I think there's good reasons to not be 5-0 votes, as long as your reasons are good ones, right? So sometimes there are good ones and sometimes there are not so good ones. But if you're voting no after you've thoroughly researched the vote and you just have not been convinced that it's a right thing to do, please feel free to vote no. As we get to the end, I just want to talk a little bit about community engagement. That's another standard, community engagement for boards. Transparency, public records, and the Sunshine Law. You all are really great. I emailed your board and asked you all some questions for tonight. You all responded to me individually. That is exactly what you should do. We don't want to reply all in emails because we want to maintain those one-to-one conversations. One-to-one conversations between board members are totally fine and totally legal, but we don't want to have a meeting behind the scenes, and we don't want to have a conversation behind the scenes with more than 2 board members at a time. Do any of you have any questions about public records or the Sunshine Law? No?
Not necessarily public records or the Sunshine Law, but you said something about the email piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember in the Newport training, I mean, it was okay to ask a question with all of this on it, but then you just said we shouldn't all be on the same emails. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me to clarify.
Okay.
It is.
Thank you.
So I always say email for distribution to all of you, A-okay. Email for discussion, all of you, not so okay. So any one of you can send an email to all of you and say, just want you all to know I'm going to be 10 minutes late for the meeting. Or just want you all to know I am totally confused about item 3 on the draft agenda, right? Then individually, the superintendent could call you or have an email conversation with you, or you could call the superintendent and then the superintendent could email all 5 of you and say, I just want you to know Chris called me. He had a question about a number on the draft financial report. It turns out we had a typo, and I just want to let you know it should be a 7 and not a 4. That's okay. But there shouldn't be Chris shouldn't email Felicia and Felicia shouldn't respond to all of you. And then Chris should say, oh, that's not the question I really asked. That's a meeting. Okay. So your question about emailing everybody a question or an information item and leaving it at that, and then asking people to either email you individually or contact you individually over the phone is fine. Does that answer your question? Okay. A unified message. So I talked again at the beginning about once you vote, it's water under the bridge, right? The conversation's under the bridge. As a board member, I was a challenger occasionally on an issue, and not always, but occasionally I was the one on a 4-to-1 or one of the two on a 3-to-2. And in the district where I worked, there was always a reporter handy, always. And that person will come up at the end of the meeting and say, man, you really sort of gave it to the superintendent on that issue, or you had a lot of questions and you got voted down. How's that make you feel? It's kind of like when they ask a football player out of the game, how do you feel? And if you can say, my thoughts and feelings about that are in the minutes, encourage you to contact the treasurer for a copy of the minutes or wait until they're posted online or whatever that might be. But my colleagues voted yes on that issue, and I'll do everything I can to support that vote, right? So make sure that all of your debate happens right here, and that once the vote happens, you're able to support that, at least in public. Chain of command. The purpose of the chain of command. I mean, people get upset that there's this chain of command. It's not to keep you from talking to staff members. That's not the point. You should have conversations with staff members. There's appropriate ways to do that. It's not to keep you from going into buildings. You should be able to go into buildings. There are appropriate ways to do that. But what it is supposed to do is to allow everybody from your community members and parents all the way up to board members to solve problems at the lowest level possible when they come up, and to put problems in the hands of the experts that can solve them. So a parent who is upset with a teacher should be guided to the teacher. I know that's a shocker, but yeah, the parent should talk to the teacher. And then there are ways for the parent to ratchet up the discussion if the teacher doesn't give the parent the kind of information that he or she needs. If everybody adheres to the chain of command, and that is not just board members, but teachers, parents, and students, the district will advance in its credibility. A little bit of communication. We've talked about some of this already, but we'll just whip through this. Personal social media. You have great social media at Groveport Madison. Let that speak for you, okay? Don't use your personal social media to expound on board decisions, to I don't know, negate something that happened at the board meeting. Using your Facebook page or your Instagram to put up a picture of the band concert or something like that is awesome. But don't talk about board business on your personal social media, and don't speak for the board. Please don't speak for the board. Yeah.
But if I have a lot of friends in my network, maybe that would have an opinion about something going on. Wouldn't it be okay to ask? You shouldn't put that on. Like, what do y'all think about free lunch for everybody? Something like that. I want to hear from you.
I probably wouldn't do that. What I would do is have a conversation at the board meeting about how we can get some community opinion about that. And if the board said, let's all use our Facebook pages, okay. If the board said, let's send out a survey question via SurveyMonkey to everybody on an email listserv, maybe that's the way you want to do it. But because if it's an item you're going to be talking about at a board meeting, I would encourage people to come to the board meeting and share their opinion. I probably wouldn't use my personal social media to ask people for their opinions about district business. You could also post it on the district Facebook page or the district Instagram page and ask people to respond.
Is it okay to share something that the school district has put on their website? Say, for example, when we had our ESSER survey, share that on my personal so that it gets out to more people.
I think that's okay. Yeah,
okay.
If it was on, okay. Yeah, if you're just regramming or resharing something, I think that's okay.
Okay.
A lot of board members will say, like in January of every year, right after you get sworn in or re-sworn in, they'll just say, on their personal, some of you know I'm a board member. Just want to direct you right now. Here's the link to the district's Facebook page. Here's the link to the district's website. Knock yourselves out if you want to, see the official word, right? Board committees, utilizing board committees. I did want to address one thing. One of you asked me about a potential committee. And the only thing I would say, I have a whole white paper on committees that I'd be happy to send you that talks about the difference between a board committee and an administrative committee. There are some significant differences, and most of those apply to whether or not you take minutes and how public and open they are, or that they don't have to be. Board committees need to be open to the public, and you need to take minutes. And so many boards limit the committees that they call board committees and that act as board committees. So I'd be happy to talk to board president or anybody or any of you at any time about that, or to send you that white paper. But utilize board committees effectively. And if any of you have a question about that, I'd be happy to answer that. I think somebody mentioned that you've had some conversation about potentially starting a facilities committee or doing something with the facilities committee.
Right. So our committee for better schools, I'm sorry, that's probably not the right name, but that's the name I remember. That was a district committee.
That was a
community committee.
Community committee, yes.
Okay. And was it sort of baptized, for lack of a better word, by the board? Did the board?
No, that was a separate PAC. It was a PAC.
Okay, so it wasn't formed by the board.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know the difference.
Yeah,
I'll be happy to say that I asked the question.
No, that's fine.
We're clamoring for a facilities committee, and I want to be clear on what exactly that is.
So when it's a board committee, it would become a board committee if you all at a board meeting, whether it's Kathy or Libby or Chris or any of you, said, I think we should form a committee. We've been talking about a facilities committee. And we should form a committee, and the purpose of the facilities committee is going to be to spend the next 6 months coming up with a master plan for Groveport Madison facilities, and all the changes we'd like to see and the things that we'd like to see improved in those facilities. And we would like that committee to come back 6 months from now and report to the board for board action. And we would like these people to be on this committee. There might be other people that want to join the committee, but we would at least like these people to be on the committee. And that kind of a charge from the board makes that a board committee, which means that you all don't have to be on it. You don't have to be on a board committee. Most times there's at least one, if not more, board members on a board committee. But what it does require when it's a board committee is that it be noticed, that it's open, and that minutes are taken, just like they are with a board meeting. When it's a community committee or an administrative committee, generally the superintendent is making all the appointments and is designing the scope of the work. District leadership team is a great example of a superintendent or administrative committee. Many districts have kind of grounds committees or a transportation committee or something like that. Those are usually administrative committees. The kinds of committees that we normally see boards do would be for special projects like a long-term facilities plan. Or maybe your IT director wants some great minds to work with him around, and from the community to work with him on a long-term IT plan. And the board says, that's a great idea, and sort of blesses that and asks that project to move forward. We see policy committee as a board committee quite often. Sometimes we see finance committee as a board committee. The treasurer may act as the ex officio chair of a finance committee, but oftentimes it's actually a board committee. So it really kind of depends on what the board wants accomplished from that work. But ongoing regular committees, oftentimes we see those are administrative committees, and they are managed by the superintendent or the deputy superintendent. Does that help at all?
And just because it's a board committee doesn't mean that you can't hire a consultant to run it, or is the board supposed to run those meetings and do the research and all that?
It doesn't mean anything. Just because it's a board committee, anybody can run it, anybody can be members of it, but usually it means the board is going to have some say about those things.
And Nancy, I believe that the last one was an administrative committee for our facilities, and Yeah, so that was one that was ran by administration rather than the board.
Another one
Even
we
though
see-
board we participated in it.
Sure.
It was an administrative grant.
Another one we see quite often is strategic planning. It's time to redo the district strategic plan. It's about the district's goals, and so therefore the strategic plan will be a board committee.
Do you find it, I mean, either way, do you think either way is better or not, like a board committee versus an admin committee or community? Do you,
I think a board committee sends a message about how the board feels about the importance of this project or this topic, or how the board is prioritizing this topic. We saw maybe 10 years ago, there were a lot of boards that were coming out and forming bullying committees because that was a big stinking issue in their communities. And boards wanted to say, we're not going to tolerate bullying anymore, and so we're going to form a committee and we're going to figure it out in this district. So they made that a board committee.
When it's a board committee, is it considered an actual board meeting?
It's, yeah. If you form, let's say you formed a board committee right now, and you said we're going to have meetings once a month in October, December, and March, those would be special meetings, and they would be open. You'd list them as special meetings of the board committee for X, and they would be open to the public.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Okay. All right, now as the home stretch here. So this is just my suggested calendar for your work. And it's hard to see here for the people in the audience, so I apologize. But administrators determine work plans and bring those to the board for open discussion. What I like to see is that there is open discussion about those and that you talk about priorities. For instance, Nancy may look at Ms. Ogden and say, I love these performance objectives for you for the year, but I would really like to see X added. Or Nancy might say, I love these priorities, but I need you to know that number 3 is really important. And what I would encourage your superintendent and treasurer to do is take the temperature of the water with all 5 board members. Because if Kathy thinks whatever else happens, you can do 1 through 7, but if 8 doesn't happen, I'm going to be unhappy. That's something that your treasurer is going to want to know about. So the board, as a group of 5, needs to come together, not only just on the list of their work, in your own work, but the priorities for that. And I'm suggesting that that happens by June, that you do formative discussions with your superintendent and treasurer 3 times a year. And that can be one of you having coffee with the superintendent in her office. It can be 2 of you going to lunch and just saying, what are your challenges? What's new? What's different? Allowing the superintendent to say, just letting you know I'm making great progress here, and this is something that's really driving me out of my mind. And doing that, it can be all 5 of you meeting in executive session after a meeting to just say, how's it going? In April and May, that the superintendent and treasurer prepare a self-evaluation based on those agreed upon goals, and that the board comes together to discuss it, first as a group of 5, and then as a group of 6 with your superintendent and then with your treasurer. That you prepare a memo for the file, and that can be really short and really sweet. It should be a memo to the file from the board. Should be from all 5 of you, and it can be just a paragraph or 2 or 3 about what went well, what didn't go so well, and what you hope is a priority for the coming year. And then hopefully you also prepare a press release or some sort of a statement for the community that just tells the community that you followed through on your commitment to doing these evaluations. And I just like to end with another one of my favorite quotes, which is, progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. So I would invite you to come to every board meeting with an idea of what you want to say and what you want to accomplish, and be open to having your mind changed by your board colleagues, or by your administrators, or by your faculty and staff presentations. So unless you have other questions, that would be it for me.
Are we going to go over the actual evaluation?
Your actual staff evaluation?
Or the actual board evaluation?
I'm not sure I was provided that.
Oh, that was the original plan.
To Terry? I apologize. I was not provided that. I would be happy to look at it. No, seriously, I would be happy to do that. And I would be happy to do anything you want to do this evening in relation to that. But I would also be happy to look at it and provide feedback following the movie. I apologize.
Can you go back one slide, Cheryl, and just show us that slide again? Because I was wondering if we're supposed to do a self-assessment and that tool was provided to us. Is that correct? What the board members meet to discuss board self-assessment in April or May.
Right.
What you're saying?
I would suggest you do a board self-assessment. It's not a law, not a requirement.
This is what is I sent it to everybody. It was the board relationship with the superintendent, board relationship with the superintendent, board relationship with the community, board relationship between members during meetings.
Did all 5 of you fill that out?
I thought we were going to do that this evening, actually,
That's
or
what
some version of it.
We were going to do tonight.
Okay. So you were going to talk through that tonight.
Yes.
Okay. Do you still want to do that? I'm sorry, it was not provided that.
I'm sorry.
I apologize.
How is it? Everybody is prepared for this, correct?
Yes.
I did not bring that.
Oh, no, I'm not. I don't think I got that.
Yeah, you got it back in. Yeah, there was emailed like twice. I think the last time I said it was going to be.
Ms. Gray, can I have a copy of that? Is there a handed copy?
It was no, not July 1st.
My guess is there's a bunch of things on that list that we've talked about.
Yes.
And that would probably click through relatively quickly, but.
Having it on my phone, it's not easy to get.
Did you need the date?
Yeah,
it was June 17th.
Yeah, that was
12:22 in the morning. Overachiever.
And then it was also sent out in July, saying that it was going to be on today's meeting. So.
What day in July?
I don't know what day it was in July. I just know that it was in July. It was after I had talked to Terry at OSBA.
My great apologies. I did not receive that.
Well, I know originally Terry said that the two of you were going to team it together.
I know that was part of your conversation.
Yeah, and so maybe that was where she was going to take that part. I'm not sure. But then she came back and just told me that you were going to take over.
I talked about getting caught flat-footed, and that's what's happening. So I will do whatever you want me to do here at this point. Just lead me, guide me.
Board, what are your thoughts?
Well, it doesn't sound like we're ready for tonight, actually, for the instrument that we're going to use.
Could I make a suggestion? Mm-hmm. Could each of the 5 of you complete it, send it to me, let me sort of analyze it, and then provide some written feedback or report to you?
Yes.
Does
that work with everybody? And then we can go over that evaluation after you've had a chance to look at it. And, yeah, because I know that
the board self-assessment should be a board document, not Libby's idea or Latoya's idea or Chris' idea or whatever. But it obviously takes your individual feedback to come up with that group discussion. So I would be happy to hear from all 5 of you, maybe have some individual phone calls with the 5 of you, and then produce a report that you could share with your community if that's what you'd like to do.
I would like for us to have a discussion as a board on the results.
Sure.
If that's what everybody else agrees to.
I do. I guess I was expecting that we were going to sit here and actually go through it together as a team and put our.
And I'm happy to do
And
that.
I'm the new one, so I don't
That's
know
okay.
how
I'm
this
happy
should be done.
I'm happy
So
to do that with you as well.
that was my expectation. But is that how it's normally done, or what's your suggestion? Is that the common practice? I don't. This is my first time, so I just. What have we done before?
We've used different things before, so
Yeah.
it's been inconsistent at best.
Okay, thank you.
And what I would do too is I would take your assessment that you have used, and what I would like to do is block it into the board self-assessment standards so that we can make sure that what you're rating yourself on actually is aligned with the standards. So we could realign that document, reset that document in a little couple ways. If you want to send me the blank one,
It's actually from you guys.
is it the one with the? Does it have the standards?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so. Well, it has. I mean, it has our name on it now because we've used it and put our name on it. But it came from the board self-eval first draft forms, and they came from this, from the OSBA, the self-evaluation guide.
Well, if I could just ask, do you want to talk through some of these things this evening, or do you want to take a stab individually with me, each of you, and then come back at the next meeting and share the things that seemed to be most challenging for you individually, or the sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. I'm wanting to take your direction.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, during that next board meeting, we have our treasurer's evaluation. So I would rather for us to maybe talk about our stuff now. That'd be my suggestion. Still do the handout and get it back to you if my colleagues concur, or you think about that, because we only have one board meeting next month. So
yeah,
and we have Miss Drummy's evaluation.
What are the other board members' thoughts?
I think we should just wait. I don't have this paper you're talking about. Did you print it out? Is there a printout available?
I just printed it out myself this evening. I guess I can get copies made, but yeah, if you could.
You said June 17th, right? June 17th.
I just did a search for board evaluation and then found the one that was in June. So it might come up as the last one, which was July 7th. Look up board evaluation. You're on the email list.
I know.
I got a question about that importance column. Is that within the section like A 1 through 6? Mark those as 1 through 6 important?
I don't have it in front of me now. They took it to make copies.
So there's two columns. One of them's called current value and one of them's called importance. And so in A, there's 6 points. And then we give each one a value, but we say within those 6 points, what's the most important, what's the least important?
Yeah.
Is that
So
what
you
we're
rank
talking?
the 6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then
Yeah, so like
Okay.
number 1 can be a 10, but have like a 1 over 4.
I got you. Okay.
One for the, I hope for the.
And make sure one gets to Cheryl.
Do we
Would
want
it be possible to do just a meeting for just this on a, since we're all in district, on a Saturday morning? Just do we invite in the superintendent, the treasurer, and the deputy superintendent for
No, they
input?
It would just be the board itself. We wouldn't need them to be here. No, it's open session.
So we would just notice that we're having a meeting for this express purpose.
Yeah, we could do it the 22nd. Just make it as if we had the second board meeting of the month. And it would just be for us. We wouldn't need everybody here.
I'd be happy to come back and finish this up with
Okay,
you too.
thank you.
And I just want to let you know, it looks like this is from 2011, this form. It's not aligned to the current standards, which doesn't make it a bad form. If this is what works for all of you, it's totally okay. But if you want to work with the newest one, which is aligned to the 5 standards I talked about, we can do that one as well.
Okay.
Or we can put these two together and they can have a baby that is the new Groveport Madison form. So, but I want to tell you, I'm not familiar with this one.
Oh, okay.
And it could be that it started as an OSBA form back in 8 or 9, and you all turned it into your, which is great.
Because I found the exact same one. I went on the OSBA.
Yeah,
site.
if you still want
to
use this, that it's awesome. It's fine. It's just not what we talked about specifically. But if you want to work with me, I'd be happy to come back and walk the 5 of you.
Yeah, if
through
we
this
could do that,
assessment and have a
does the
conversation.
board agree the 22nd? That was a regular meeting other than. That's fine.
Can we do another day? I know Wednesdays were the days, but when we canceled, I have something that day. A couple things actually.
Is there a board meeting that night already scheduled?
Is there another day other than that?
I would just like to say that the Groveport farmers market will be done, so Tuesdays are good again. The only day that I'll have farmers markets are Friday and Saturday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Good.
Okay. So what day works for everybody? I guess what day works for you?
Hey, I'll see how flexible I can be if you tell me a date that works for the 5 of you. That's harder probably than me.
I am fine.
Can we do the 29th, the following Wednesday, instead of the 22nd? If that works for everybody. This month. September 29th is what I'm proposing.
That works for me.
Okay. Anybody else? Is it in conflict with work for anybody? You good? 7:30 still? Does that work, Melissa? Yeah. Okay. Kathy?
Okay, so between that, just so I have my marching orders right this time and there's no miscommunication. Do we all want to use this form?
I'm good with using this form.
Do you want to fill it out individually and have me come back to you with what you all said so we know how like or different you are? Or do you want to just start on the 29th and have a conversation and try and come to consensus from the jump?
I want to do everything.
Yeah, but I would like for us all to come prepared, ready to have our.
Okay. So why don't we get agreement that all 5 of you will take this form and think about it, maybe jot your own notes, right? And then we will come together as a group. I will take this form and I will align it to the standards though, just because that's a me thing probably. And then we'll have a conversation and see where we all land as a group on the 29th.
So you'll get us back the form that is aligned with the standards, and that's the form we'll use for notes and such to come back on the 29th. Is that correct?
Well, why don't you use this one for your pondering?
Okay.
And then I will just play with it and align it to the standards, and that's the one we'll talk off of on the 29th. But it won't be significantly different from a content perspective than this.
Okay. Everybody in agreement?
Yes, ma'am.
7:30 on the 29th.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, and I'm sorry.
And again, I apologize.
Miscommunication there.
Thank you.
Thank you for going over that. It definitely should assist us in filling this out. All right, we are going to move to item J, adjournment. Could I have a motion, please?
So move. This is LaToya Dowdell-Berger.
Madam Treasurer, could we have roll call, please?
Mrs. Dowdell-Berger.
Aye.
Mr. Snyder.
Aye.
Mrs. Walsh.
Aye.
Mrs. Gray.
Aye.
And Mrs. Gillespie.
Aye.
Motion is carried. It is